It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I want to start by saying welcome to New York, to those supporting tonight's proposition. While neocons and liberals alike down in the Beltway in Washington and from other places around the country debate the theory and these concepts of grand strategy to do with China, we here in New York have been working very, very hard, of course, in our many professions to try to understand the nature of its reform, its growth, and make sure that we benefit as a nation from what's the epic changes taking place in this country, making sure that we don't gauge China against the abject failures of 30, 40, 50 years ago, some of which have already been cited, but instead recognize that China is not at all standing still and is very much a work in progress. So I, for one, very much look forward to the chance to debate these issues here tonight. The notion that China's strengthening is bad news for us, which is really what we're talking about, of course. China's boom is essentially economic at its core. So the role that has been cast for me is to lay out three critical economic arguments for why, whether you're a New Yorker or not, you should be very much against the motion that we have on the table before us this evening. First argument, China's boom is benefiting others in a big way, not just China. Secondly, that its growth is very much helping its people, not repressing them, and thus mitigating in an important way many threats that we'd have to deal with if China were not growing. And thirdly, that we, the United States, together with China, have larger economic responsibilities of a global nature that demand our mutual respect and our enthusiasm, in fact, instead of confrontation with China over its growth and strengthening, which indeed is what we're here to debate. Let me explain each of these very briefly. First of all, China's growth is benefiting the economies of rich and poor nations alike. Japan, with merely 40% of the labor force that the United States has, exports $10 billion worth of goods to China every month. The United States only exports half that amount. Germany, with a mere 1/4 of our labor force, has run a net trade surplus with China over the period 1992 to today. The point of this is China is not an economy that is closed to rich world exports at all. It's very much open to them. Developing nations in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in Africa are also benefiting in a way the World Bank couldn't have imagined a few years ago from China's dynamic growth. It's embracing China as a new destination for exports. Even Taiwan, that's of such concern to us all here at this table, is in fact enjoying a $66 billion a year trade surplus with its arch enemy, the People's Republic of China. A trade surplus which has grown from 14 to 40% every year of this decade so far. Taiwan, in fact, is moving away from the attitude behind the motion on the table this evening, away from confrontation and toward a working out of things in a peaceful manner, a deepening and integrating its economy with the mainlands. Bottom line, our fortunes here depend on what we do, on how we compete with China, not on what China does. We should spend more time competing with Germany and Japan, in fact, for the Chinese market, and less time blaming China for all of our troubles. Of course, the United States is already a major beneficiary of China's economic activity. If we cut off all trade with China tomorrow, we would create very few American jobs. We would import practically everything we import from China, but from other countries at a higher price, which wouldn't really benefit anybody in this country. Second major argument I want to make. China's growth benefits its people, and by doing so, mitigates profound troubles that would eventuate if that were not the case. The real threats, the existential threats to the United States today come from impoverished and stagnant states riven by discontent and insecurity. North Korea, Iran, Iraq, the Middle East in general. Stagnant economic circumstances in Sudan, in Venezuela. These are the engines that breed terrorism and nihilism, which are the true threat and trouble we should be concerning ourselves with. China could have been among those. In fact, the China of 1978, before the dreaded boom that we're here to debate this evening, would have been one of those. By embracing our economic model, in fact, which is what they've done, they've grown beyond that danger. And though 800 million Chinese are still poor by our standards, they're striving toward prosperity and not toward extremism. Those people, those toiling Chinese, are the boom that we're here to pass judgment on this evening. And while their toil brings competitive challenges for us, we would be gravely mistaken to try to turn back the clock to the failed state China was before this boom began. Prosperity is not an alternative to political change in China. In fact, it's been the handmaiden of it. The totalitarian government ruling $200 per capita China in 1978 bears practically no resemblance to the Chinese government managing a $2,000 per capita economy today. Likewise, the Chinese government that runs $10,000 per capita China tomorrow will be vastly different than the one we deal with today. Third major argument. Beyond our narrow economic interests and theirs lie global economic responsibilities that must be addressed cooperatively. Tonight we're debating whether the benefits of a stronger China are worth the trouble it brings us along the way, or rather, whether the troubles of a stagnant China would suit our interests better. Because that's really the question. It's which set of troubles suits the American interest and which does not. It's a reasonable question, but such a narrow-minded calculus of self-interest alone does not befit a great power, and certainly does not befit the United States. Economic success, foremost ours, and now China's as well, is creating a great economic, political, and indeed security challenge, climate change and environmental crisis globally. The U.S. has refused to address its responsibility on carbon emissions, and the reason given, China, a convenient fits-all purposes excuse not to act when you don't want to act. China, interestingly enough, has refused to accept carbon commitments for the same reason. The United States should go first. This logjam is fueled by the mistrust that tonight's motion puts forward, and indeed, it cannot be permitted to stand. We have an economic responsibility to the planet to deal with this together, or we're going to lose more than anybody does. To finish, let me say this. I have a private practice in addition to being a think tanker and professor, and my customers are troubles. They're troubles I'd like to have more of, frankly. I don't have a problem with troubles. We have more troubles with Canada economically than we do with any other country. Is that bad news for the United States? It's not. It's part of a mature relationship. Those in favor of tonight's motion counsel a strategy meant to leave China in ruins, using a playbook last used in the Cold War, building up our military instead of our economy. Who will join us in such a strategy? I urge you to vote against tonight's motion. The troubles of a stagnant, unbooming China
Daniel Rosen, your time is up.
far outweigh
Your
the
time is
challenges of its growth. Thank you.